The sun burned high above the dirty streets of Durox 9. Dust flew through the air with every footstep, every hoverbike, every market cart. No one looked down, no one saw her. She crawled slowly, her small hands shaking as they pulled her weak body. Forward, she wore nothing but a torn cloth wrapped around her waist. Her back was bent, her thin legs dragged behind her like useless ropes. She was just a broken thing, forgotten by her own people. The crowds moved fast, eyes forward, minds busy. Vendors shouted in alien tongues, selling bright fruit and machine parts. Guards walked past in black armor, their visors glowing red. None of them stopped for her, not even once. She reached for a dropped crust of bread near a trash bin, but a child kicked it away before she could grab it. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. Her name was Zali, and once, long ago, someone had whispered that name with love. Now it only existed in her mind. She had no home, no voice, no legs, and worse, no hope. But she kept crawling. Because she had nothing else, a group of aliens passed by, well-dressed and laughing. One of them glanced at her and sneered. "She's still alive." He muttered, "Should have been thrown in the incinerator." She heard it, but she didn't stop. She was too weak to be angry, too tired to care. At the edge of the marketplace, near the metal fence that separated the inner zone from the trash yards, a human man stood. His clothes were dusty, his face rough, and a heavy bag rested on his back. He was just passing through, looking for parts and maybe a bit of rest. But then he saw her. He didn't mean to. She was small and nearly hidden in the shadows of the fence. But something made him pause. His eyes met hers, even from a distance. And in that moment, he felt something twist inside his chest. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper. He stepped forward, just one step, but someone pulled his arm. "Don't," a traitor said. "She's broken, waste of time, not even worth a credit." The man nodded slowly, saying nothing, and turned away. But he kept looking over his shoulder. Zali had stopped crawling now, her face buried in the dust. She was breathing, but just barely. That night, in the small room he rented above the storage docks, the human couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her eyes haunted him, not because they were sad, but because they were still alive, still burning. The next morning, before the sun rose, he packed his things and returned to the same street, but she wasn't there. He looked around, checked behind the bins, under broken stalls, even in the alleyways, nothing. Then he saw it, a thin trail in the dust, drag marks, small handprints, and drops of dark blood. He followed it, heart pounding. The trail led him beyond the fence, into the shadows of the trash yards. Mountains of metal, plastic, broken machines, and bones surrounded him. The smell was thick and sharp. Flies buzzed near the old oil drums. He kept walking, stepping over sharp wires and twisted steel. Then he saw her, lying beside a pile of rusted metal, barely moving. Her arms were scraped raw, her face pale. She had tried to keep going, even after the world gave up on her. He dropped to his knees beside her and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, but didn't wake. He picked her up carefully, holding her like something precious and fragile. She weighed almost nothing, just bones and skin. He looked around one last time, then turned back toward his ship. He didn't know who she was, or what he was getting into, but deep in his chest, something whispered she deserved a second chance, and he was going to give it to her, no matter what. The human carried her through the trash-filled alleys, his boots crunching over broken glass and metal. She didn't wake, not even when he crossed the security gate and entered the cargo zone where his ship was docked. Her breath was shallow, like wind that could vanish any second. He laid her gently on a padded seat inside his ship and opened the medical bay panel. It was old tech, not perfect, but it still worked. He ran the scan. Her spine was cracked in 3 places, legs undeveloped, organs barely functioning. Her species had healing traits, but not without help. He searched the ship's supply list. Hands moving fast, mind racing, the Meganet beeped a warning. It needed a biogel core to stabilize her injuries. Rare, expensive, and hard to find on this planet. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then pulled on his jacket outside. The city hadn't changed. People still laughed, shouted, traded things, and ignored the weak. He made his way into the back alleys of the tech district, where merchants kept their stolen goods hidden behind thick curtains. The first vendor refused to sell. The second laughed in his face. The third asked for more credits than he had. The fourth one didn't speak, just pointed to a table covered in junk. The human stared at it, then began digging. A knife appeared at his throat from the side. "Don't touch unless you're buying," said a tall, insect-like alien, voice low and sharp. The human didn't flinch. He slowly raised one hand, pulled out a silver coin the size of a thumb, and dropped it to the ground. The alien stepped back. Surprised by the payment, the human picked the one component he needed, the biogel. Unit cracked on one side, but still functional. Without another word, he walked out of the alley, back in the ship. The girl still hadn't moved. Her chest rose once every few seconds, and her fingers twitched like she was reaching for something in her dreams. He inserted the gel core into the unit, closed the panel, and activated the healing cycle. A soft hum filled the room, and a gentle blue light washed over her body. For the first time in hours, she breathed deeper. He sat beside her, watching silently, wondering if she would survive the night. He didn't even know her name, but he had seen something in her eyes, something no one else saw. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted, eyes closing slowly. When he woke up, she was gone. The seat was empty, the Medi-Knit still glowing faintly. He shot to his feet, heart pounding. Then he saw the trail tiny handprints on the floor, leading to the back of the ship. He followed them, opening the storage door slowly. She sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and terrified. She stared at him like he was a monster, her thin arms trembling. He raised both hands, showing he had no weapon. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. She didn't answer, just blinked and pressed herself tighter into the wall. He crouched down, placed a water bottle on the floor, and slid it toward her. She looked at it, then at him, unsure. Her hand moved slowly, picked up the bottle, and drank like she hadn't had water in days. He sat down across from her. Keeping distance, they sat in silence. The hum of the ship, the only sound. She finally whispered something in her own language, voice weak and broken. He didn't understand, but he smiled gently. She looked at him again, this time with less fear. He pointed to himself, human, then pointed to her with a question in his eyes. She hesitated, then touched her chest. "Zali," he nodded slowly. "Zali," he repeated. She flinched at the sound of her name, like it brought back pain, but she didn't crawl away this time. Instead, she sat there, holding the water bottle, staring at the man who should have left her to die. The man who came back, and something began to shift inside her. Something she thought was long dead hope. The ship floated quietly above the junk-filled valley. Engines off, lights dim. Inside, Zali lay wrapped in a soft gray blanket, her eyes open, watching the ceiling. She didn't understand everything the human said, but his tone was calm. His hands careful, never rough. She had been hurt too many times to trust anyone. But he didn't treat her like the others. He didn't call her broken, didn't push her away, didn't try to use her. He simply stayed every day. He gave her water and warm broth made from human supplies. Every night, he placed an extra heat pack beside her and sat across the room, keeping his distance. Sometimes, he spoke about Earth, about trees, about animals with feathers, She didn't know what a squirrel or mountain was. But his words made her imagine things she'd never seen before. She wanted to believe he wasn't like the others, but her body remembered pain too well. One morning, as light flickered through the ship's windows, Zali tried to sit up. Her hands trembled, and she gritted her teeth, using her elbows to push herself. The human turned quickly, stepping forward to help, but she hissed. Baring her teeth, her body shaking, he stopped, hands raised, and slowly backed away. She didn't want pity. She wanted strength. He nodded and stepped back to his chair, watching her with quiet eyes. She kept trying, groaning under the weight of her own body, but she did it. She sat upright, breathing hard. Sweat on her face, he clapped once, gently, a small smile on his face. She blinked at him, surprised, then looked away, hiding the smallest hint of a smile on her lips. Later that day, she found an old human datapad near the storage unit. She tapped it clumsily, and a hologram appeared showing humans training in zero gravity. Their muscles working in slow motion. She watched them for hours, studying how they moved. The next day, she tried to copy them with just her arms, gripping the edge of the wall, pulling herself up, then down, over and over again. He didn't stop her. Instead, he quietly placed a pillow under her in case she fell. She didn't thank him, not with words, but her eyes didn't glare anymore. Each day, she grew stronger, not her legs. Not yet, but her spirit. One night, she woke up from a dream, gasping, her skin cold with fear. In the dream, chains had wrapped around her again, and voices laughed while she begged. She sat up, heart racing, and saw the human asleep in the corner, his head tilted against the wall. She crawled closer, slowly, silently, until she was near enough to hear his breathing, steady and peaceful. She reached out, touched his coat, then pulled back, unsure why she did it. Maybe she just needed to feel something real, something safe. The next morning, when he woke, he found her sitting beside him, already practicing her arm lifts. He said nothing about it, just handed her a protein bar and started the engine checks. There, words were still few, but their silence was full of meaning. Later that evening, she pointed to her back and made a motion like wires plugging in. He understood, walked to the med unit, and pulled up her recovery chart. The healing was halfway done. But her spine still needed support. He would need stronger tech to finish the job. And it wasn't going to be easy to get it. But as he looked at her, sweating, trembling, lifting herself again and again, he made a quiet promise in his heart. If she wouldn't give up, neither would he. He didn't know what the galaxy would throw at them next. But one thing was clear. Sally was no longer just some broken alien girl in the dust. She was fighting to stand, and he would fight with her. Rain tapped softly against the hull of the ship as it rested in the outskirts of a forgotten mining zone. Inside, the human was fixing an old solar panel, sparks flying as he welded broken wires. Zali sat nearby, staring at the flame's reflection. In the window, her mind far away. She hadn't spoken much in days, only nodded or made short gestures, but something inside her was building up. Like pressure in a cracked pipe, the human noticed, but said nothing. Giving her space, that night the silence was heavy. Thicker than before, he made a simple meal, placed it near her, then turned away. Pretending not to watch, she didn't touch the food, just kept staring into the corner. Eyes wet, but not crying. Then she whispered something so low it almost vanished into the hum of the ship. He turned his head slightly, waiting, but didn't move closer. She tried again, this time louder, her voice dry and shaky. "Do you know?" she said slowly, "what it feels like to be sold for less than a broken tool?" He didn't answer, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "I was born wrong," she continued. "My legs never worked. And my mother hid me for a while." Her fingers clenched the blanket as her voice trembled. "But when food ran out, They sold me, said I would die anyway. She looked down, her shoulders shaking slightly. They chained me to cleaning carts, slapped me when I cried. Sometimes didn't feed me for days. The human's knuckles turned white as he gripped his cup, but he didn't interrupt. One owner called me pet, like I was some dirty animal, she whispered. Another just laughed and let his guards hurt me for fun. There was a long pause. The sound of rain filling the ship again. Zali raised her head slowly, her eyes red and distant. I stopped talking, she said, because no one ever listened. The human stood, walked over, and knelt in front of her. He didn't speak. Didn't offer words she wouldn't believe. Instead, he gently held out his hand. Palm up, open, patient. She stared at it for a long time, then hesitantly reached out and placed her fingers in his. It was the first time she allowed him to touch her without fear. He nodded once. A silent promise passing between them. Jolly's breathing steadied, and for the first time, she leaned her head forward just enough to rest it lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move, just let her stay there as long as she needed. They sat together like that, two strangers from different worlds, bound by something stronger than blood. Trust didn't come easy for her, and comfort wasn't something she even understood fully, but that night she slept without nightmares when morning came. She was already awake, sitting upright. Waiting for him with the datapad in her lap, she tapped a new video. One that showed injured humans training with prosthetic limbs, crawling, falling, getting back up. He watched quietly, then nodded. Okay. Understanding her silent message, she wasn't done. She had more to say without speaking, without begging, without crying. He handed her a small tool, and she began working with him, holding wires, tightening bolts, wiping sweat from her forehead with one weak arm. She didn't need to be fixed. She needed to be believed in, and finally, someone did. The ship landed in Sector 3, the air thick with smoke and engine fumes. This place wasn't marked on regular maps, and for good reason. The buildings were stacked like broken bones, metal scrap hanging loose from rooftops, and the ground buzzed. With danger, the human stepped out first, scanning the area with sharp eyes behind him. Zali waited inside the ship, her legs still too weak to stand, but her spirit stronger than ever. The med unit was working, but slow, and the core was unstable. If they didn't get a stabilizer soon, the healing would fail. He didn't tell her how risky it was, but she already knew. He pulled the hood of his coat over his head and walked into the maze of narrow streets. Shadows followed him, some human, some not. Everyone in this district had a price, and no one did anything for free. He reached the old black market zone, where doors didn't have names and windows had bars. He pushed into a narrow stall lit by red lights and old wires. An alien with 6 arms sat behind the counter, polishing a plasma knife. The human placed a small pouch of credits on the table and whispered the model number of the stabilizer. The alien paused, blinking, then leaned forward with a smirk. Rare tech, he said slowly, and very expensive, the human added. A silver coin, then another. His last ones, still, the alien shook his head. No deal, he said. But you want to trade something else? Something alive, maybe? The human's eyes turned cold. He took the pouch back slowly and turned to leave. But the alien's guards blocked the way, 4 of them, armed, ready. He didn't speak, just dropped low and moved fast. One guard's knee cracked under a hard kick. Another hit the wall with a loud grunt. The alien screamed, grabbing a stun gun. But it flew from his hand before he could pull the trigger. Within seconds, the small shop was in chaos. Sparks flying, crates knocked over, shelves broken. When the fight ended, the human stood alone, bruised, panting, but standing. He reached over the counter and grabbed the stabilizer unit himself, tucking it under his coat as he stepped out into the street. Alarms began to buzz. He didn't run, just walked fast. blending into the smoke and noise until he reached the dock again. Back in the ship, Zali sat up, tense, holding a small pipe, as a weapon, just in case, when she saw him, bleeding but smiling. She dropped the pipe and rushed forward. He handed her the unit and gave a short nod. She stared at it, then at him, then, without thinking, reached up and touched his face gently, for a girl who never trusted anyone. It was the closest thing to saying thank you. He connected the stabilizer to the Meduna. The machine's hum changed stronger, steadier. A warm light flowed over her body, and she gasped as something deep inside her shifted. It hurt, but this pain felt different. It felt like hope. He stayed beside her the whole time, ready to catch her, ready to carry her again if needed. Outside, Sector 3 burned behind them, the place already forgetting what had happened. But inside the ship, something important had changed. She had been worth fighting for, and he had proven it with blood. The healing light faded slowly, leaving behind silence and a strange warmth in the air. Zali blinked, her breath heavy, her hands gripping the blanket tightly. The human sat nearby, watching every movement. His eyes filled with quiet hope. She hadn't spoken in hours, but now her lips parted, dry and unsure. "Something feels different," she whispered. He nodded once, standing and holding out a hand. She stared at it. Then at her own legs, still thin, still bruised, but no longer lifeless. With a slow breath, she reached up and took his hand. He helped her sit up, then guided her to the edge of the bed. Her feet touched the cold floor, and she gasped. The sensation new, strange, almost painful. He crouched beside her, saying nothing, giving her the choice. She closed her eyes, focused and pushed. Her legs trembled, her arms shook, and her body swayed, but she rose, not fully. Not strong, but she stood. Tears filled her eyes as her legs wobbled beneath her, and her voice broke into a whisper. "I'm..." Standing, he stepped back, letting her have the moment. She took a step, then another, falling into his arms with a soft laugh that turned into a sob. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Later that night, she practiced walking again and again, gripping railings, leaning against walls, falling and rising. He watched her with pride and worry, knowing this victory was only the beginning. Outside, the stars turned slowly, but danger moved faster. In the dark corners of Sector 3, news had spread. Someone had stolen rare tech from the black market dealers, and the description matched a human with a scar over his left eye, and worse, someone recognized the girl. She wasn't just a forgotten slave. She had been owned by one of the underlords, a missing piece of property now standing on her own 2 feet that made her dangerous. A message was sent across systems. Short and cold, found. Her send a collector. The next morning, the human checked the radar and noticed a ship entering orbit. One with no ID tag, no signal, moving too quietly. His gut tightened. He packed supplies fast, checked fuel, and made sure Zali was safely strapped in. She looked at him with concern, already sensing the shift in his eyes. "Trouble?" she asked, voice stronger now. He nodded, strapping himself in. "They're coming for you." She didn't flinch this time, didn't cry. Instead, she stared out the window and whispered, "Let them come. I'm not crawling anymore." He looked at her, surprised by the fire in her voice. A part of her was still healing, but another part was already awake, the part that refused to be chained again. The sky above the valley turned dark as storm clouds rolled in, but it wasn't rain that was coming. The black ship hovered above the ridge, silent, sharp, and watching. Inside, a crew of hunters prepared their gear stunners, chains, dampeners. For movement, they weren't here to kill. They were here to reclaim. They had done this many times, pulling back what was lost property. Zali stood near the exit ramp of the human ship, her arms crossed, legs stiff but steady. She wore a jacket now, oversized and torn at the edges. But it was hers. He checked the shields, adjusted the power settings, and loaded a shock baton. "Just in case, you don't have to face them," he said softly. "We can run. Lose them in the outer moons." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes focused on the ship above them. "They'll never stop," she said. "Not unless I stop being afraid." The human placed a hand on her shoulder, a quiet sign of support. Then the hunter ship dropped lower, its doors opening like a beast showing teeth. 4 figures stepped out, tall, armored, their faces hidden behind steel masks. One of them raised a scanner, and it beeped loudly when it locked onto Zali. "Return the property," the lead hunter said, his voice like metal scraping rock. The human stepped forward first, standing between them and Zali. "She's not property," he said, calm but firm. The hunter raised his weapon, unfazed. "She was bought and paid for," he growled. "We have rights." Zali moved forward then, slowly, each step careful but full of purpose. She stood beside the human. No longer behind him. "You don't own me," she said, her voice clear. "I walk now. I speak now. And I decide what happens next." The hunters hesitated, unsure how to handle this. Slaves didn't talk like this, didn't stand like this. Zali reached into her pocket and pulled out a data chip. The one with records. The human had secretly downloaded a full log of the Underlord's illegal dealings, including her sale and abandonment. She threw it at the ground near the hunters. "You want to take me?" she said, then explained that to the council. The lead hunter paused, staring at the chip, then back at her. He didn't bend to pick it up, but his weapon slowly lowered. "This isn't over," he muttered, then signaled to his team. They turned, silent, and walked back into the ship. Moments later, it lifted into the sky and vanished behind the clouds. Zali stood there for a long time, breathing deeply, her body shaking not from fear, but from everything she had just taken back. When she finally turned, the human was still standing there, a faint smile on his face. "You did it," he said. She looked up at him, her eyes no longer hollow, no longer hiding. "No," she replied. "We did it." He nodded, and together they walked back into the ship, not as stranger and survivor, not as helper and victim, but as something stronger, something built from trust and fire. The past would never disappear, but now it no longer defined her. She was free, and this time she chose her path. With each step, she left behind the girl in the dust and became someone new, someone powerful. And he stayed right beside her. Because some second chances change more than one life. They change everything.